welcome to our next webinar. This is webinar number 3. We are talking today about the different dental indications in NetFab and how to prepare them in your workflow. So let's move forward, let's proceed, and we got the agenda here. So we have number 1 is the I.Mastermodel, model and stump. Number 2 would be surgical guide and splint. Number 3 is crown and bridge. Number 4 would be cast and partial framework. The 5th will be Gingiva workflow, and followed by the last one, which would be the tray workflow. All right, I think I haven't introduced ourselves. My name is Robert, and
hi, I'm Ignatius.
Great. Okay, so I think we can start.
Okay, great. Just to add on to what Robert was saying, if you have questions regarding a specific topic that we are covering, you can just put it in our text box of the webinar here, because we cannot hear anything on your side, so that we can cover these questions at the end of each section.
Yes.
But if it's a bit more in-depth, then we can cover it at the end, and so on and so forth. All right. But without further ado, let's get right into it. So like Robert said, the first topic is I.Mastermodel, model and stump section. So let's go and see what it looks like in NetFab. Oh, we just need this active. So, all right. So we are going to work through the workflows. So for this instance, we need to select our I.Mastermodel or model and stump. So we'll just first look at the I.Mastermodel. So we covered this under one topic because it's fairly similar, the process. The only thing that's significantly different is that when we look at the I.Mastermodel, you have the option to hollow the model. But generally speaking, when we have models with stumps, some designer softwares allow for the models to be adjusted in such a way that there's no needing to hollow it because it's already done by design. So that's why we'll just look at the model and stump for this indication. First work step is to add this part. So we'll just go and add the parts that we have here. So it's just 3 stumps, 1 model. It'll import that, and as we can see, it's all there. Let's just make sure that everyone can see it properly. All right. So what I want to do in the first step is we want to make sure that we can nest them very nicely. So by arranging the parts. So I just select this. The default settings on here are good enough to use. So I'll just say perform. And there we see that it has arranged it, and then we can go ahead and center it. The one thing to note in this instance is that there's one stump that's outside of our stump area. Now the stump area is in the build platform that is specifically designed for the stumps. So I'm just going to manipulate this a little bit by making sure that all my stumps are properly sitting in the area of the stump area, or the area with no holes in the platform, and then just reorganizing the model so it sits nice and snug around that. Okay, it's fairly straightforward. Like I said, import, placement, making sure that the stumps are in the correct location. Then you can go ahead and create that build. Okay, so I don't see any questions regarding this as of yet.
Yes.
So we can just progress in the meantime. So
all right, let me take over. So the next topic would be the surgical guide and the splint, and we will see that it is a little bit different from the model workflow. Let me delete this quickly to get the parts we want to have. First things first, obviously we want to change the workflow from model and stump to surgical guide. We will use the surgical guide workflow for splints as well. This is really similar, so you can use the same workflow type. Second thing you notice is that all of a sudden the platform option is now available. So instead of just having the standard platform, we're now having a second option, which is called surgical guide. By using the surgical guide platform, we will get the best result in accuracy and dimension-wise. So we have less warpage, and all the part will be queued together with the platform during the post-processing, but that would be a different topic, obviously.
Yeah.
So about the workflow, you see the first step is similar to the one we had before. Use the add parts function to get your data from your folders. Here we just have a drill guide as an example. Next would be arranging parts, but please keep in mind that the part is not orientated perfectly onto the drill guide platform, which means first you hit the button top on the top perspective in order to just rotate it in 2 dimensions instead of 3 dimensions.
Yeah.
We definitely want to avoid that.
Yeah, agreed.
And as you can see, I'm just doing a quick rotation here in order to match the shadow of the part onto the surgical guide platform. That looks really nice. Next step would be, yes, we want to add some support. So we use the add support function. We have the checkbox use integrated support, select surgical guide, and use the lift parts before supporting function, and please allow 3 millimeters as a gap. And then just hit the perform button. As always, we have to wait a couple of seconds until NetFab has finished this process.
This is totally, so the loading time it takes to create the supports is entirely dependent on the complex design, or the amount of triangles in your design. So sometimes this can be very quickly, other times it could take a bit longer.
Yes. And now let's take a closer look to the shape of the support, because we had it earlier on that the question came up, do we need a base grid for this kind of part?
Yes.
Actually, here we don't need it if you're talking about the surgical guide platform. The reason is that in this special script there is already a base grid inside. So by just using the script you have a good connection to the platform. Is that fair to say?
Yes. Especially because it's interconnecting. So like Robert said, basically works as its own stability.
Yes. So this is all you need to know about this workflow, but I think the question will come maybe.
This is, so Antonio was asking about the ability to create your own support scripts, or when you want to only use certain support scripts. Currently, because we can go into a lot of detail, this was also asked this morning, we will cover this in a later webinar where we will only talk about support scripts and how you can create your own ones, and so on and so forth, as to not deviate from the idea behind here, to only focus on the indications of the dental market.
Right. Yes.
But this is something in future will be available, but at the moment it's best that we keep it as simple as possible.
That's right. And maybe the question will come up, because we had this earlier on, can we use the regular platform in order to print a surgical guide? Yes, you can. It's just a question, has your customer the surgical guide platform on site or not? Yes, we would always recommend to use the surgical guide platform for best results, but you definitely can also use the regular platform as well for both splints and surgical guides.
Yeah.
All right, so this is pretty much all about the surgical guide workflow. Please let us know if you have any further question.
Jeroen's just asking about how to manipulate the width of the predetermined or the approved support scripts. Again, and how to avoid. Okay, avoiding the holes. This is something that we would suggest to use a base grid. That simple. Or with this surgical guide, it's got its own grid.
I think the question was, he wants to avoid supports in the sleeve. Which would be
in the
this one.
yes.
Actually, the script is designed in a way that we want to reduce or minimize, or actually get rid of the supports in this area. So if you use the latest engine, it should be fine. but we always appreciate feedback and let us know if there's any further issue. And the rest of the scripts we will discuss, as Ignatius mentioned, in the future. Future webinar.
In more intense detail as to, because it is quite a large topic, and we'll probably dedicate a whole webinar just for that. But I think we can talk about if the default support scripts are too thin.
Yes.
What options are available? So this is directly related to the material that you have selected for that job file. So in that material setting, you can go and adjust the support width. So you can just,
Let's just do that together. As you all know, in the material settings, we have a couple of options. Let's just search for a surgical guide material. For example, this one. And as you can see in the object properties, there is a parameter called support width. And by increasing the number from default, so we go a little bit up here in 50 micron steps, you can increase the thickness of your support in a way to make it a little bit stronger in case you have issues with our default support script.
Yes. So this is a quick way how you can do that when using the default scripts.
Yes.
Okay.
Don't forget to save the changes you made, but other than that, just use support with parameter and it should be fine.
All right. So if you had nothing else to add.
If there's no more question, I think we can move on.
So let's go and look at some crown and bridge. Now, when we're looking at the workflow for crown and bridge, there are some separate ones. So let's go and look at that. So there's crown and bridge. Now they work fairly similar, so that's why we incorporated into one process. For the crown and bridge is fairly good to use. So as that loads the work steps, we can go and add the parts. So we're going to just use a single crown for this demonstration. And we can see that the crown is what I would call the right way around, but the crucial area on the crown is in a wrong position. So we want to orientate this correctly. Again, this is totally dependent on the designer who creates these parts. If they save it in this format or in this orientation, it will import it in the same way. Okay, so we want to rotate this by 180 degrees. Generally, that's how it will be adjusted. So there we can see it's now correct. We can arrange it if there were more parts, but in this instance, I'm just going to center it for us. So there it is. The next thing to do is apply some supports. So we're just following the work steps down the side there, ensuring that we have selected the crown and bridge support script and that we're going to lift the part by at least 3 millimeters. Okay, so I just perform that. The thing to note with smaller parts is sometimes it's not so easy to remove it off of the build platform, or the handling of smaller parts are a bit harder. So if you have like 20 small parts, it might be beneficial to create a base grid that covers all of them, so that when you're removing it, A, it's easier to remove, and B, it's all together in one piece. But for this demonstration, we will just create a small base grid around the shadow of the part. So we've increased the offset by 0.5 millimeters, so it just makes it a little bit bigger, especially because the part's so small. So let's perform that, and this will also ensure that all the supports are properly formed.
Yes.
Again, this depends on the settings of the supports. If they are positioned over one of the holes of the platforms, that it will it could risk failing. But with the base grid, this is not a case to worry about. Okay, I don't see any questions, so I think we can just keep moving forward.
Yes, of course.
Robert?
Let's see what we got next on our agenda. The next would be the cast and the partial framework. Now, it is pretty similar, but let me show it to you with the correct parts. As before, we select the cast workflow, and let's see what we got here on the right hand side. Pretty much the same, some small changes here. There it is. As always, we start with add parts, and let's see what we got here in our benchmark folder. There is a partial framework which I would like to use, but again, it doesn't matter if you have any other cast part here, the workflow is the same. Now we have the same situation as before with the crown part. It really depends on your design result, on the design output, whether you have good orientation or bad orientation, or whether you have to work on it or not. So now in this case we already have a good position, that's how it should be. We are avoiding supports in the crucial areas, so this way we can keep it. So yes, you can arrange parts here. If you have multiple parts, makes sense. You can center them, and the next step would be adding supports. Adding supports, the same step as before, but just instead of crown and bridge, you select the partial framework setting for best results. We have the same gap here of 3 millimeters between part and platform, so we just hit the button perform, and then again, depends on the size of your part, depends on how many triangles you have.
Correct.
NetFit will take either a bit longer or a bit less longer than before, so we always have to figure out how long it will take, but as you can see, it might take up to a couple seconds until the process is done. And at the end, we're doing pretty much the same as in the crown workflow. We should create a base grid depending on how big is my part. Now you see there is a button grayed out at the on the right hand side, which is called cast grid. This is not available yet, we are working on it currently, but until then we have to create a manual base grid.
Which you can save as an STL,
yes.
Or you can just create a base grid that fills the whole build area, but you have to be cautious with cast material because of how brittle it is after it's printed. So that's why we do have a specific cast base grid, but it has not been approved, so we're still in testing phase, and with future releases this would probably be released. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah.
And but in the meantime you can create your own, like Robert said, and he'll show us how to do that next.
Exactly. So the next step is I need to know how big is my part in XY. So let's go to the platform overview, and here I get the information about the length and the width of the part. So that is about, let me check this out, 40 to 60. Let's keep that in mind. The next step is you open the part library of NetFab, you go to design and select the hexagonal grid. Now this is already pre-designed from us.
Just in different axes.
Just in different axes, that's right. So let's do the changes here. This is 40 to 60. You see, I just changed the length and the width, and you can either save this as default if you want to use this.
Yeah, if you know that the general shape or size of the models will be roughly like this, then it's fine to have this as the default.
Yes, otherwise you just hit the button create part, and as you can see we have created a nice and lovely base grid which we can put manually in the center, or you can also use the center button here as well. So let's take a closer look. As you can see, all the supports are really nicely interconnected with the base grid, so that's what we want to see, and I'm quite sure we have a successful print job here.
Yeah.
And actually this is all about the cast workflow and partial framework, of course. Let us know if you have any further questions.
Yes, so Andre did mention there was a question this morning whether or not we can print cast on surgical guides.
Good point, yeah.
Well, I can leave that to you if you want.
You can explain.
Yep, so if you're printing your models, you print it on the regular platform or on the surgical guide platform. It totally comes down to your workflow at your location. So we can only recommend what we have. At the end of the day, it is how you handle that printed part on your site. So if you find that it works better to print it on Surgical Guide, then you will just need to use the manual workflow to use the cast parts on there. But generally speaking, if you're using the standard platform, you should be able to print everything reliably.
Yes.
Yes, with the concern that if it's correctly handled by the users. So yes.
That's always the case. Yeah.
We just have a question here from Gabriella. Gabrielle is asking about crown and bridge pins that aren't necessarily working always on the customer side. And the other question that he had, that the parts that he imports, he needs to manually adjust the height from the build platform. Is that correct, Gabriele? That we're understanding this correctly. You're asking about importing of the parts and they're always in contact with the build platform and that you have to manually adjust that.
I think if it means that the part is always connected to the platform, this can be solved with the gap function here in add support. So if you enter the desired gap, what we would always say it's 3 millimeters, then this is automatically done. But maybe the question is referring to something else.
Perhaps because let's just open the crown and bridge workflow real quick.
Just do it once more.
So we can just go and have a proper look at that. Did I not select it? No. Control A. All right. So in the crown and bridge workflow, we by default, do you need supports? Under the clasp for the cast parts?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
For sure.
This would definitely, but the script that's with the NetFab, if you have the latest engine, should be applicable. The script setup for that is very reliable. Again, if you want to create your own scripts for specific designs, then this is something that we will cover in a future webinar where we will go into further details on how to do all these modifications. Let's just go and see, because with the crown and bridge, when you've created the part and the part was created to be off of the build platform, then if you have the magnetic platform active, it will always pull it onto that platform. Okay, so the purpose of this is to make sure that all your parts are on layer 1 when you're printing. So this is a precaution thing. So theoretically speaking, if I have this deactivated, I can go and import the part. So let's go and see. For this instance, this is not applicable, but this will allow you to manipulate it either manually like this, or if you have multiple parts, for instance 8, we can position them, yes. So if you have 8 parts and you want to move all of them up with the same amount, you can manually do that here and then selecting how high you want to move that. Or, we'll just put it on the platform. Or you select the parts that you want and you can go and add supports to them, ensuring that you have the lift the parts off of the platform function activated with a minimum of 3 mil. So in this instance, yeah, this will be the wrong way around. Let's just orientate them real quick. Yes. Now I select my parts, I say add supports, and then it will apply that lift and the supports in one operation.
Yeah, that is really handy. We got another.
Going to create build, not always attached. Customer. Interesting.
Okay, I think in this case that would be something for our service department to check.
Yes.
On this special case, normally this is not something we observe.
Yes, so generally speaking, Yeah, with the supports that are created with the support scripts, they work reliably, and that's why they're available. It purposely comes down to what version of NetFab you're running, and if the customer has the latest engine file installed, because it makes no sense for machine 1 to work correctly and machine 2 not, if they have exactly the same software.
Yes.
But like Robert said, this is something that we would encourage you to contact our service department about, so that we can go and investigate on directly on the customer PC to try and resolve this. Okay.
Right.
Right.
Okay, I think we can move forward to the
Yes.
next topic, which would be gingiva.
Yes.
Oh,
So those, my apologies for hogging the webinar today.
Absolutely no problem.
All right. So I'm just going to remove all these parts. So there we have now for the gingiva. We go and select the workflow that's relevant, and that's just this one here. Again, so this is with the model or the model master and the stump. It's a fairly straightforward process because the designing is quite generic in some retrospect. So when we're looking at bigger gingiva models, that's a bit easier to manage, but when it's the smaller ones, then it's a bit more to be aware on placement. Okay, so let's go and add the parts. There's only one model that we have here. In this instance, it looks like this. Now, I'm not going to orient it or arrange it very much because to me this is fine. It has a flat surface, and that comes down to the designing. This material has a very unique viscosity, and it has very unique specifications for printing, which makes it very difficult to use for supports or anything other than just flat on the build platform. So just be cautious of that. Okay, so I have my part imported. Let us center that, and there it is. And that's as simple as that. Same with the model, send
Pretty much.
the model and stumps. It is just about placing it. Note though that if you do have a small part and it's very delicate, that it's best to have it in your stump area. So that's the center area with no holes, so that it's not being affected by the holes. But for bigger parts like this, this is not a problem to place wherever it will fit inside your build area. Yes? Okay.
Okay, sounds good. If there's no more question, for gingiva workflow, I think I can work on the last section here, which would be tray. Now tray is a little bit different. What you can see here is the workflow is manual, so that means there is at the moment no dedicated workflow for tray available. Means I go all the way up in order to select the manual workflow. Just wait a second until all the buttons are available on the screen. I just hit the button load parts, and let's see what we got here in the tray folder. Open up, there it is. Okay, there it is. So now we have pretty much the same situation as we had with crowns and with cast and partial framework. We have to take care that we got the right position.
Yes.
The part, the right orientation, let's say. So now this is already pretty much perfect, but let's assume you have a situation where it looks like that, really silly and super weird, and we just want to take it all the way back to the platform. Now, instead of doing all the work manually and just guessing what's the angle here, we have a function which makes life much easier for you.
Yes.
So you just select a range at the top, and then you have the button align. And with this align function, you get the option or the possibility to just highlight the area you want to have connected to the platform. So what you do here is you just click on the area you want to have connected to the platform. Let's zoom out to see the result. Looks nice. And at the end we just need to press the button apply, to apply for all the changes, and this is it. So now we got a good positioning here in terms of the connection between part and platform. The last thing we need here, or not the last thing, but another thing we need here is the function add supports.
Yes.
Now there is no tray support script available at the moment, so what we do here is we just select the quick support, which is working absolutely fine for trays. Take care that you do not use the lift parts function here, so this is grayed out. Keep it as it is, please. Hit the button perform, and this way the tray STL file will not be lifted up, it will stay in that position, and that will just add some supports to the part itself, and this is it. Now we have the situation here that a couple of these supports are maybe put right onto a hole that would make a mess during our print job. So what we want to have is a base plate to get an interconnection between supports. And now we can use either shadow of parts or the outbox. Let's just use shadow of parts first, because then we can see a something which could cause a problem for us later on.
Yes.
We just saw that in the first webinar this morning, and I think it's worthy to discuss. So first of all, the basic task for the base grid is done. Yes, it connects all the supports really nice together, but we could have an issue at this very corner here. So you see this is kind of a very small fragment of the base plate. It tries to create hexagonal cells, but because we have a very unique shape, so it could be a very small tiny element at the border, we end up with having a small fragment here of the base plate, and this could cause trouble later on when you want to remove the chop from the platform. So the other possibility is, let's get rid of that first. The other possibility is you create a base plate by not using shadow of parts. Instead, you use the outbox of parts. And we just perform the same steps again. Just wait a second or two. And then we will see that this platform is much better. Of course, now you can say, well, I wasted
so
a lot
much
of material.
material.
Let's do that a little bit better, but at least we can get rid of all the fragments. So now let's get rid of the base plate once more, and I just rotate my tray to have a minimal outbox, and I just perform the same step again, and you will see that we won't use so much of the precious resin.
That's correct.
Sorry. And this is much better now.
Yeah.
So that's what we want to have.
And you can line them up really nicely together. Now,
really well.
Sorry.
Is there?
Yeah. So we do have a couple of questions.
All right.
So the first one was from Jeroen. He's asking, how would I position this if there was no handle?
Good question. Let's get rid of the base plate, and we get also rid of the supports just to have a situation. So let's assume that this is without any handle. So I think the crucial area is the palatinal area, what we are looking at the moment. In this case, I would say either you put it horizontal for a quick print result, or you just, let me check, I have to go back with undo. What you can do is you just put it down in a way that you have created a gap. So let's say you put it up vertical like this. So again, we assume that there is no handle there. And when this is dragged all the way down to the platform, you just use the add support functions, but then you just use the function lift parts before supporting, and this way, yes, you do not have a connection to the platform. We don't want to have that without handle, but this way you could print a tray without a handle really well, by just using this function, but with this addition, with this small add-on here.
It's very important to lift the part if you don't have anything. Well, when you are wanting proper predictable supports to be created, so that we have determined that 3 mm is sufficient distance for minimum support size to have reliable supports come from it. And that's why we do have that 3mm
Yes.
arrays. Yeah.
I just saw the next question. We already answered pretty much. So yes, you could print them horizontally.
Yes.
It's just the question of how many supports do you want to remove. So obviously, if you put that part horizontal, let's just do it like that. You see it's going all the way down. And if you start adding supports here, you can imagine that because of the sheer size of the shadow here, you end up with having much more supports to remove. So this is just a question of do you want to have a fast result with maybe a little bit more work involved in the post-processing, or do you want to have do you want to put as many parts as possible on the platform, and that would be the vertical placement of the trays.
Yes, so it's not so much vertical or horizontal as much as it is what your workflow works is designed for. So you could even have these at a slant, similar with Splint, so to speak.
Yes.
Depending though on the design itself, because if you do have overhanging areas, then this will probably cause problems in your final product. But yes, this is something that we will talk about in support scripts and what to look out for. But yes, horizontal, vertical, not a problem.
Yes.
As long as you have proper adherence to the build platform, then there should be no issue with the print.
Exactly.
Okay.
I guess there's at the moment no further question in regards to the tray workflow. Just wait a second maybe, but I think it will be fine. All right, looks good. So I think we have pretty much covered all the topics at the moment.
So yeah, please, if anybody has any more questions or something that they can, please ask us now. We do have some more time available to answer any further questions if anything comes up.
Yes, we really appreciate all your input, all your feedback.
Thanks, Antonio. I'm well, thank you. Robert?
I'm also doing really fine. I feel very comfortable here in this webinar room with Ignatius together. Really nice. Always appreciate it.
That's very kind.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay. So if there aren't any more questions, then we would like to just inform you that the future webinar, so tomorrow's one.
Okay. Actually, the question was, do we have to place more supports with the old P20 without force feedback? The amount of supports is the same. The only difference between a machine with or without force feedback is just the printing speed. But there is no influence on the printing process.
Yes.
So that means everything what you prepare in NetFab for a P20 is the same job preparation as what you do on a P20 Plus, for example. There's no difference in there.
No, and I was just going to actually say that this is the topic which, so tomorrow's webinar, we are talking about printer basics, so the hardware inside the printer, where we will cover some of these topics, which would make it a bit more clearer for everyone.
Yes.
So yes.
So we're looking forward to see you tomorrow again, where we will cover these questions.
So Young is just asking if the support scripts would be different if we're using the really large manufacturing machines, namely the D90, which we have. The support scripts are applicable across all the machines. Okay, so it's purely about the connection from the build platform onto the model that you have, to make sure that it's not going to break at the breaking point during the printing process, so that you have a sufficient amount of supports. But when you're using the automated scripts, this is taken care of, so that you as a user, you do not have to work or think about that.
Exactly.
But when we're looking at further support-oriented topics, this is something that we would like to save for a future webinar because it's so in-depth, and that we don't want to jump the gun here by covering things that might not make a lot of sense for everyone just yet. Okay. And different beamers, no. So young, same thing. It's the same printing process. Yes, there's different hardware components, but the supports and the connectivity is the same. So there should be no significant difference between your prepping of the jobs. Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, so it's great having you here.
Yes.
Looking forward to see you guys in the future webinars, and for us it's about to say stay healthy, stay safe, and stay three-dimensional.
Yes. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Bye guys.
And we'll catch you next time.